Basilia de Guzman reached inside her duffel bag, rifling through dozens of plastic bottles filled with a lifetime supply of prescription pills, according to the San Francisco Chronicle, January 20th, 2000, in an article called Living on Toxic Ground. These pills included synthroid, beckinase, nitroglycerin, and Tagamet, among several others, to treat her for her illnesses caused by the contaminated soil in her area. She's sick from head to toe, and dozens of other residents living in the Midway Village housing project in Daly City relate to Guzman, claiming they too have long suffered from serious health problems and constant pain caused by that same contaminated soil beneath their homes. But Daly City is just one example of the many communities suffering from what many people label as environmental racism, or in other words, dumping toxic waste into low-income areas. A Civil Action, a recent movie, actually demonstrated some of the effects environmental racism can have on various communities, problems ranging from lead poisoning to clusters of leukemia and birth defects. By informing you of this silent killer, hopefully we'll better be able to understand the risks that we take by ignoring this problem. First, I'll explain the effects environmental racism can have on various communities, then examine why it focuses on minorities, and last, offer some solutions to what we can do to put an end to this problem. Now first, let's take a look at the effects environmental racism can pose for many low-income families, especially children. As I stated previously, the health problems residents in Daly City are battling is just an example of the many communities suffering from contamination. Communities such as West Dallas. According to the article Overcoming Racism in Environmental Decision-Making in the May 1994 edition of Environment, states that a study with West Dallas lead smelters showed that cleanup crews were estimated to remove 30,000 and 40,000 cubic yards of lead-contaminated soil from sites such as schools and even private homes, causing an epidemic of lead poisoning in school-aged children suffering from lack of concentration, lack of hearing, and stunted growth. And according to the article Making Connections in a Watery Elm, in the March-April 1997 edition of Sierra, states that in Columbia, Mississippi, low-income school children play across the street from barrels full of poisons. These incidents show that low-income school children are not receiving the same educational benefits as the elite, and they must suffer, not only because they want to attend school, but because their parents didn't happen to make enough money. But lead poisoning isn't all that these people must suffer from. Nuclear plants every day are excreting carbon monoxide and sulfur dioxide, increasing the number of deaths from asthma. Skyling, which causes liver and kidney damage, as well as brain hemorrhaging. Ammonia, nitric acid, silicone, and many other deadly chemicals are guiltlessly being released into our oceans, airs, sewers, and drinking water, causing countless health problems and epidemics. According to the article Environmental Racism, the Uneven Distribution of Risk, published by the Reputation Management on their website, states that in Morrisonville, Louisiana, also known as Cancer Alley, is an 85-mile corridor of chemical plants in an extremely large African-American low-income population. And according to the article Overcoming Racism, Environmental Decision-Making, states that all along the Rio Grande, nuclear plants would dump toxic waste into a river from which 95% of the region's residents get their drinking water. People began to notice an epidemic of anencephaly, also known as being born without a brain, is 4 times the U.S. national average in these areas. But the thing is, it just doesn't affect these minorities. It affects us all. We all drink the same water, breathe the same air, and live on the same soil. After all, we do live on the same environment. Now that we've seen some of the effects environmental racism can cause for many of these low-income families, let's take a look at why it's affecting these minorities. First off, according to the article Overcoming Racism in Environmental Decision-Making, industries have chosen to build their toxic waste sites in areas which they feel the population is less equipped and less educated to fight their presence, which is all too often in areas with an extremely large African American and Latino population. And school districts are purposely building their schools on toxic waste sites in order to save money. Since low-income families must work all day in order to make ends meet, they feel the parents will be too busy to worry about the health risks that their children may be facing. And according to a phone interview on March 7, 2000, with David Rowe, a senior attorney at the San Francisco Environmental Defense Fund, claims that industries are actually dumping their toxic waste into these areas, it's because it's cheaper. Get this, The amount of money to properly dispose of these deadly wastes is about 4 times the amount of money in fines they'll have to pay if caught doing this illegally. They may be saving money, but they're definitely not saving lives. So remember, when taking your child to a new school or moving to a new area, these people that I previously stated would give your life in order to save an extra dollar. Even if it may not be affecting your community personally, we must come to the realization that it will one day if it hasn't already. Now, because environmental racism adversely affects us all by destroying the only environment that we do have, let's consider some solutions to putting an end to this problem. Remember, you can change things. First, you can resort to political action by writing a letter to the president or state officials explaining the effects on children and their education. Also include that the fines for illegally disposing of these wastes need to affect the company enough to put them out of business. You can also contact me afterwards where you can sign a petition helping to support a newly proposed law that prohibits any schools or housings to be built in a toxic area. You can save a child's life. According to the Enviro News Brief on the Environmental Protection Agency website, some communities have resorted to going to the Environmental Protection Agency for help, where they can dig deeper into the problem, help justice be served, and plants be closed. Even if it doesn't affect your community only, you need to focus on the fact that it will one day, and we need to help prevent this problem before it develops any further. So when people around you start getting sick, dying young of unnatural causes, one may be assuming fate, nature, or even coincidence is the prime suspect, when the prime suspect may be lurking in your very own backyard. The fact is that no one should have to live in these conditions, whether they be rich, poor, African American, Latino, or white. Families are suffering every day due to the unequal distribution of risk. If we don't take action now, not only will the problem in schools get worse, but epidemics will be on the rise and industries will be on the move towards all communities, whether they be rich or poor. If we don't take action now, and if only we had taken this action sooner, Basilia de Guzman, among many others in Daly City, wouldn't have to take a lifetime supply of prescription pills, and many parents wouldn't have to undergo the disappointment of giving birth to a child without a brain, knowing that this could have been prevented. If we don't take action now, the only ones we're hurting is ourselves and our future, a future where we'll all be forced to live in a dump.